By making me the family's unwanted child and my sister their golden child, my parents destroyed my life. By making me the family's undesired child and my sister their golden child, my parents damaged my existence. I can't make my update without it, so I'm reposting it. Nothing has changed about it. It's precisely as it was before the entitled parents mods took it down, save for this caption. After reading a similar experience online, I felt compelled to share my own. My only Reddit post will be this one. I also believe that sharing it would make me feel a little better, so I'm uploading it. I've had some counseling, and discussing this topic in particular was quite beneficial. I reasoned that I might as well share it online. I am, therefore. This year I turned 18, and just recently without my parents' help. My sister is roughly 10 years my junior. She was an unforeseen pregnancy that almost didn't reach term. I was never informed much about how difficult my mother's second pregnancy was, so I don't know many specifics. However, I'm aware that when my sister was born, my mother's body could no longer support any more children. That year, she spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital. My mother also nearly died during the birth. Because my younger sister might not have been born, it caused her and my father to get attached to her. And I've felt like the other kid in the house ever since. Unless they needed a free babysitter, that is. My parents' long-term favoritism has led me to believe that they were truly insane for failing to recognize the precise harm it was causing to me. And I'll explain why it's rebounding on them now. Since my sister was 2 years old and sobbed when she saw a birthday cake that wasn't hers, my parents wanted me to let her blow out my candles on my 11th birthday. I had no desire to do it, but I was coerced into it by my parents. After her, they relit the candles so I could do it once more, but it felt like a ruined moment. The following year, the year after that, and so on, all experienced the same thing. They simply persisted in enforcing it until it was standard. My birthdays also had to include gifts for my sister. I also never had any on hers. When I questioned why, they just replied that boys don't have to worry about it as much because I'm a boy. Did they truly believe it was a wise thing to say? I know I was a child, not at all. Additionally, on my birthday, my parents would always pick a location that my sister would like before mine. In the end, it seemed more like I had no birthdays, while my sister had 2 every year. Beyond this, my sister became the center of my parents' entire existence. My sister had to want to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. Unless I could accomplish it by myself, it was vetoed otherwise. They didn't seem to disturb me there, so I learned to just shut myself in my room with my video games. Except if my sister wants to rush in and irritate me. That's why I locked the door. My parents requested that I take it off. However, as an irate teenager fed up with being interrupted constantly, I flipped out. Several times when I was naked, my sister came running in. Additionally, my parents were angry with me for being in my own room, nude. They retracted their objection and simply let me to keep the lock after I pointed out how ridiculous it was. Because she was being pampered every day, my sister developed a princess complex. She was also very demanding. I therefore avoided her as much as possible, any justification that would spare me from dealing with her, even if it meant making things up in order to get some alone time. I had more personal time once my parents hired a teenage girl to watch me. After my sister refused to listen to her, the babysitter quit, and my parents attempted to avoid paying her by claiming that she did a poor job. My parents eventually gave the girl the money they owed her after the girl enlisted the help of other people. Then they regularly hired a second girl to watch the kids. This one remained too. However, my parents insisted that I watch my sister whenever I had free time. Therefore, if I could, I made a special effort to keep occupied in my part-time job. My sister gave me directions and treated me like her own butler. She would not quit using her ridiculous moniker for me. The mere mention of that moniker gets me furious. And she would phone our parents and cry if I didn't give her all she wanted. I would then face consequences for mistreating her. This led to a lot of heated arguments between us. And for a while, my relationship with my parents deteriorated to the point that we seldom spoke to one another when I refused to give in any longer. Nevertheless, they had the audacity to boast to other parents that they were the reason I put in so much effort during my high school graduation. They weren't mistaken, though. However, the explanation they were considering was not the real one. I put a lot of effort into waiting for my free time. However, my parents pretended to have accomplished a lot. They may have done so prior to the birth of my sister. After all, though, it was all about her, It wasn't until parent-teacher conferences that they inquired about my schooling. I received a B and C average when I graduated, and even though the trip was meant to be for me, my parents simply took me to a spot after graduation where my sister would always have a better time than I did. However, everything really came to a head in July when I turned 18. Despite the fact that it was my 18th birthday, it didn't seem to be about me. For once, I fervently hoped that we would be dining at my favorite restaurant. Instead, they held a celebration at Fun Zone Pizza, a local copycat. It is the only similar location close to us. Therefore, anytime something significant was accomplished, it was the de facto location for celebration, including my graduation from high school. I did mention that my sister would prefer the place than mine. Kids half my age were having parties all around me, and I was bored since I had nothing better to do but play outdated arcade games and eat terrible pizza in exchange for tickets to poorly produced prizes that made me unhappy. My parents then produced a pink cake with white flowers on it when it was time for cake. Yes, my name was on it. However, there were only 10 candles, and it was clearly not a boy's cake. My sister was directly in front of my parents when they lighted the candles and blew them out. And that's when it happened. I suddenly started crying uncontrollably after having a mental flashback of all the hate that had been stored up inside of me. In front of the entire family, I, an 18-year-old boy, started bawling. Time appeared to stop because everyone was so shocked. Everything I had been suppressing for the last 8 years immediately poured out like word vomit when I woke up. This occurrence was witnessed by the entire family. I simply went outside to sit beside the family car after it was finally finished. Following me, a number of family members apologized and said they were unaware of the pink cake because my parents had kept it covered until it was served. The fact that they were unaware didn't matter, I said. For the past 8 years, Bella had dominated my life while they all looked on. I didn't have any actual birthdays or festivities of my own. She was the center of their attention. Then, on the most important birthday of my life, they all expected me to simply nod and smile as usual as they gave my sister a cake that wasn't even for her birthday, but was specifically for her. A few of them began to apologize to me. However, they gave the justification that they had assumed I was fine with it because my parents had told them I was. I informed them that I would never tolerate it. Every year, my parents had me do it until I feigned acceptance. "Look where we are," I remarked, extending my arms. Does that seem like the location where I intended to celebrate turning 18 and graduating? All this time, nobody even made an effort to defend me. My sister gets everything, and I'm simply the other kid. My parents stopped allowing me to invite my friends long ago after they attempted to express their opinions on my sister blowing out my candles, so I didn't even get to have any of them there. Was wanting one that was about me and not her really so bad? There are 365 days in a year. Rather, I am treated like the entitled, avaricious brat that I am for wanting my own birthday. After that, I simply resumed my nasty crying. By then, my father had come outside to scold me for creating such a big commotion. My sister was unhappy because I disrupted her moment, and my mother was sobbing too. As a result, everyone in the room who witnessed it believes they are awful parents. He ought to understand why I yelled at him in the end, saying that they are terrible parents. The rest of the family came down on him like a pack of wolves when I said that. I guess it's better late than never. However, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. My father was virtually backed up to the front door of the restaurant. The majority of the group then poured back inside with mom so they could argue with my mother as well. My grandparent is at Bomber, who were sorry for keeping their eyes closed for so long stayed with me. What was spoken to my parents in the restaurant is unknown to me. However, they didn't return for about 30 minutes, and they appeared so defeated when they did. Both of my parents were unable to look me in the eyes, and my mother was still sniffling after sobbing so much. Both of them made clumsy excuses for their actions, and then proposed to have the party again somewhere else. However, the crowd didn't find it to be sufficient. Ahemed one of my uncles, quite loudly, and my parents promised that they would never force me to give my sister anything on my birthday, let her blow out my candles again, or make it about her in any way. An additional ahem was heard. In addition, my parents expressed regret for sending me a cake that was clearly not intended for me, and that they simply thought that, given my age, cake was no longer a concern for me. That was a really bad thing to say. I lost my temper once more and screamed at them that my age didn't matter. They were aware that they had given my sister my birthday without providing a valid explanation. Then I stated that because it was already too late, there was no purpose in having the party again. They made it quite evident that they don't care about me. They destroyed eight years of my life before I reached adulthood. What birthdays with them would I be able to anticipate in the future? My father, however, became upset with me for stating that. However, he stopped talking when the whole family screamed at him. He was assured by my grandfather that I was absolutely correct. Furthermore, they are unable to reverse the harm that has already been done. He claimed that since the birth of my sister, my parents have been terrible people who have favored some over others and treated me like a black sheep. Furthermore, they were all terrible because they had allowed it to happen to them. Furthermore, I owe much more than just an apology. My life was due to me. As she sobbed my name and apologized, my mother broke down once again and attempted to get closer to me. However, I wouldn't allow her to come close to me. Additionally, half of the family prevented her from approaching. I just remarked that I was at my breaking point and turned to go. I was found and brought back by one of my aunts. Several family members were shouting and swearing at my parents because of what had transpired, and I could hear it. But after all this time, I was so angry that I couldn't even be pleased to see some justice. In addition, where was my sister during all of this? She remained alone at the restaurant, eating cake and tearing apart gifts that were meant for me. In case anyone was curious, when I sobbed and left, my parents did offer her some cake. You'd think they wouldn't be concentrating on it right now. Later on, however, they were exposed for it. As everyone else left the party, my grandparents persuaded me to settle down and take a seat in their vintage minivan. When my sister was discovered to be opening my gifts, she pitched a fit. Among them was a brand new smartphone that she was not permitted to keep, so she hurled it against the wall and destroyed it. A few months ago, for her own birthday, she received a brand new phone. In the end, I was so furious that I was screaming that I would never want to have another birthday party. Additionally, I was allowed to spend the night at my grandparents' place. I still hadn't spoken to my folks when I got home. I refused to talk to my mother, so she simply kept crying. In addition, my dad was just as reticent as I was. My grandparents persuaded me to join them for dinner the next weekend. I was shocked to discover a completely different party waiting for me when we arrived. They continued to have the "don't hate us" attitude while my parents were around. Nearly all of them had smiles on their faces. A large chocolate cake with 18 candles on it was present. My name was even displayed on a banner. Since I didn't really receive either this year, they dubbed it my happy belated birthday graduation party. I did had to act like I was delighted. 8 years of favoritism cannot be reversed by a single excellent party, or really put a dent in it. What happened to my sister? It wasn't all about her like it used to be, so she was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip twisted. Additionally, they sang a modified version of Happy Day instead of Happy Birthday for me. My sister then screamed as soon as I extinguished the candles. I mean, a tiny girl's scream that is so loud it hurts my ears. She had to go quickly, and my parents had to bring her back later, looking much more distraught. For the remainder of the celebration, she sulked in silence in her chair. However, I also received a new smartphone. Along with additional consequences for her actions at the previous party, my sister also had hers taken away. The smartphone wasn't everything, though. My entire family helped out and bought me a car. It was merely a white Volvo that was old. But as soon as I saw it, I fell in love. My granddad fixed it himself and has some automotive knowledge. I was overjoyed. However, my sister screamed again, so it was obvious that she wasn't. She began to throw a fit and demanded a car as well. It took some time for them to return outside after my mother had to take her to the restroom. My father simply returned to his dejected appearance. My sister had successfully damaged their attempt to appear respectable in front of the entire family. My sister was acting that way because my parents trained her to be a princess-spoiled brat, according to other family members who also strongly expressed this opinion to my parents. Needless to say, I immediately began to drive the automobile around. However, a few days later, my sister really damaged the automobile by using a hammer to smash 2 of the side windows and split the windshield so badly that it was impossible to drive. Before she could do any more harm, my parents were able to stop her. However, when they caught her and removed the hammer, she screamed bloody murder and then attempted to bite them. Oh, my sister infuriated everyone, particularly my grandparents, as my sister's outburst destroyed the car my grandfather had worked so hard to build. My sister was so pampered by my grandparents that she was unable to understand that I might have something that she was not. Additionally, a number of other family members attacked my parents, accusing them of preparing my sister for failure by treating her like an entitled brat who demands everything. And because they won't stand up for her and teach her some respect, she will have a horrible adult life. Her acts did not go unpunished, though. My sister was sent to boarding school at the start of the new school year after being grounded for the remainder of the summer. My mom also sobbed uncontrollably over it. However, my father had to insist that it was the only way to begin repairing the harm they had caused. Yes, they accept full responsibility for their actions. They found it difficult to refrain because no one took their side. At that school, my sister is utterly miserable. She has been lying nearly all the time, and she despises the rules and the outfits. She isn't getting away with any of it, though, because cameras are now practically everywhere. She yelled at our parents for placing her in that situation despite their repeated attempts to visit her. I've heard that she might continue attending school until she becomes 18. My car's repairs were covered by my parents. The windshield and windows were replaced by an auto glass business, and the vehicle now looks exactly like it did before. My granddad approached me in August and offered to get me a job working for a friend if I was interested. However, it was 40 kilometers away. Therefore, unless I wanted to commute, I would have to leave my parents' place. I was all for relocating. However, it wasn't so simple to find a first apartment. Just to get accepted to a studio, I needed to have my credit card approved. However, I understood, and since September, I have been residing in my current residence. My folks are often attempting to get in touch with me, but I don't talk to them very much. I just feel uncomfortable and awkward whenever we talk. My grandfather has said that they just don't want to admit how terrible their parenting was and that they're trying to feel better about themselves by trying to persuade me to forgive them. However, I will not pardon. Not very soon. At last, I'm content and no longer with them. They have nothing now. Not only do they lack my sister, but they also lack me. Additionally, because my sister's boarding school is expensive, my parents had to put in extra hours at work. My car's repairs and the party they had to prepare for me were also above my wildest expectations. They have nothing left but their work, an empty house, and irate relatives. To me, it feels like amazing suffering. Furthermore, I don't enjoy it. However, it is ultimately the consequence of their own behavior. Edit, I want to express my gratitude to everyone for the honors I have received. It holds great significance for me. I am aware that my post was lengthy and difficult to read, but I had to get it out of my system. And now that I've done that, I feel much better. In the comments, I saw several people referring to this post as phony in different ways. I don't hold you responsible. In your position, I would read this with extreme skepticism and have similar questions. I did, however, live it. That's just the way some parents are. Several folks who had similar or even worse circumstances have also gotten in touch with me. Is what my parents did really so unbelievable in light of all the horrible parents out there? Granted, it did seem excessive for the entire family to rush back into the restaurant to speak with my parents. However, I come from a close-knit family where we spend a lot of time together and work together. At gatherings, it can easily morph into a group against a single individual. I've witnessed a drunk cousin who was acting quite inappropriately being encircled and then taken out of the party to sober up in another room. Personally, I don't really like group mentalities, but in the end, it saved me because my parents were so humiliated by their actions. They couldn't even come up with a good explanation for what they did to me without coming across as even worse individuals. They have essentially given up, claiming they have no justification and are making a concerted effort to win my favor. And even so many of you are complimenting my family members for their assistance, I'm fairly certain that a large portion of that assistance was motivated by embarrassment. With the exception of 2 years due to COVID, they attended the most of those 8 birthdays. However, they took no action in the other 6. When my sister blew out my candles, they had a dissatisfied expression on their faces. However, they remained silent. Why not? My grandfather is the family's son and my dad is his. In addition, my granddad is a rather scary individual. He would go to any lengths to assist you if you were on his good side. The whole family despises you if you are on his bad side. An excellent explanation for my dislike of collective mentalities. However, they all felt ashamed after my grandfather essentially blamed them for their failure to assist me for years. And they all contributed to my car's purchase price. They didn't need to give much each because they had so many relatives. When I registered the car in my name, I had the receipt. After spending $2,000 on it, they added more money for tires and other parts. My grandfather changed the fluids and performed a tune-up himself. The interior was thoroughly cleaned by my grandmother. All of them have my sincere gratitude. However, I still wish to put some distance between us. To figure things out on my own, I need time. Additionally, it's likely that I won't see my parents again until Christmas or Thanksgiving. My sister has also been likened by some to that Westville Hills character, Kevin Cartman. Additionally, the comparison is fairly accurate. My parents gave my sister a lot of junk food, which is why she is overweight. She despises eating anything nutritious. She once topped mashed potatoes with gummy bears, as I witnessed. I feel sick at the idea of consuming that mixture. She also spent a lot of time in the restroom due to her bad diet. To address it, my parents had to purchase fiber-rich foods for her to consume. Furthermore, I don't believe they were cheap to obtain the ones that tasted well. In addition to being incredibly bossy, my sister enjoys feeling in control. I frequently lock myself in my room to avoid her because she orders me around almost all the time. Because she was so domineering and dominating, she lost a lot of friends. My parents would just tell her that the other children were jealous of her uniqueness. In fact, my sister frequently called herself a princess, and she does remind me of Kevin Cartman because of her enormous tantrums when she didn't get her way. I am aware that my sister is also not a moron. She received a C average in school and doesn't put in any effort. She would most likely receive straight A's, a student, if she put in the necessary effort. Edit 2, it appears that this subreddit has banned me. I'm not sure what I did. However, I may have overwritten the post. In any case, I am no longer able to respond to comments. Apologies. However, I want to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who provided me with encouraging comments. Many thanks to all of you. Update 2, my parents have been celebrating my sister's birthday for the past 8 years. What, a year has passed? I assumed I was done here, so I didn't log in again for a while. However, I simply returned one day after deciding what the devil was going on, only to discover a large number of private messages requesting updates. I'll give one then. The majority of what I'm going to share with you is based on what my parents and grandparents told me. Just keep in mind that I'm essentially recounting what I discovered. If it sounds too strange. Yes, I'm doing all right. However, the same cannot be true about my younger sister and parents. Sometime after my last post, my sister made a number of attempts to leave boarding school. She tried to do nothing when her machinations and falsehoods failed to get her anything. However, that did not succeed. She then attempted to go on a hunger strike. She declared that unless our parents arrived and brought her home, she would not eat anything. My mom almost got into the car to go get her baby. However, my father had to intervene and remind her that they were to blame for my sister's actions. Before her hunger strike had lasted 2 days, my sister was clamoring for food in the cafeteria. She was only permitted to eat nutritious snacks and sweets, particularly after a pediatrician informed my parents that unless my sister, Miss Sunshine, controlled her weight and ate foods that were nutrient-dense, she could get diabetes in the future and possibly have her growth stunted. That is, no more mashed potatoes with gummy bears on them. Naturally, my sister attempted to bully the other boarding school girls. They didn't take her bullshit, though. She got into a fight one day and was severely battered after being attacked by several other girls at once. And they kicked her as a group until a teacher broke them up. There were no severe injuries to my sister, but her entire body was bruised and scratched. Yes, she placed the blame on everyone but herself. Additionally, I've heard her mention that the other girls should simply follow her instructions. No, they didn't. Thus, they avoided her. She reportedly had a fit over it. It was mentally unthinkable for her to not get what she wanted because she had gotten her way with everyone for so long. My sister was frequently given junk food by my mother while she was attending the boarding school. My sister was caught doing it as well. My parents got into a heated argument over it. Once the jig was up, though, my mother didn't try to slip her any more junk food. My sister used to be addicted to junk food and still wants to be. Yes, she has hardly altered at all. Are you all that shocked? I'm not. She's only marginally better since she's a little more resigned to the reality that she's not the universe's center. Her plots to escape boarding school only got more complex. She tried self-harm to acquire what she wanted after just a few months there. In the cafeteria, she managed to get her hands on a knife and threatened herself with them while standing on a table, demanding candy or be sent home. She didn't simply demand to be brought home. That's right. She also desired chocolates. In my initial post, I did mention that I had witnessed her adding gummy bears to mashed potatoes. Putting gummy bears on food she disliked was her favorite thing to do, because our parents couldn't persuade her to eat it any other way. Is it possible to picture gummy bears on salad? It sort of negates the purpose of salad, but every time we ate, Mom would bring a bag of gummy bears to the table. Even the sight of gummy bears makes me remember. As they attempted to calm her down, they brought my sister any candy they could find. She eventually slid and tumbled off the table, though. She suffered a concussion to her forehead and shattered her left arm and clavicle in the next tumble. Even the boarding school had had enough of her by now and didn't want her to go back after she was discharged from the hospital. Her attempt to commit suicide actually made matters worse. A child's mental ward. She has been diagnosed with severe narcissism, which she was brought up with, and has been compelled to attend therapy. Unless my parents take her out, she is unable to leave the ward. They also made her follow a very rigorous, healthful diet and continue her education from there. She may just as easily refer to it as her personal hell. In order to get her beautiful baby out of the ward, my mother wanted to go. However, it led to a major argument between her and my father, and she struck him with the closest object she could reach during that altercation. It just so happened to be a bottle on the counter in the kitchen. The bottle cut him fairly badly, damaged his cheekbone, and shattered on his face. After the police were summoned, my mother had to be carried away in the back of a police car while he was transported to the hospital. In the end, my mother underwent a psychological evaluation and was confined for a number of months. And in order to help my sister, she had to face her own intense impulses. It turns out that my mother's severe mental traumas from her own early years are the cause. However, nobody else will or knows anything more than that. Future divorce from my parents has been discussed and is still being discussed. However, as far, neither of them has progressed beyond sleeping in different bedrooms. In my case, it wasn't too long ago that I turned 19. At a restaurant they know I enjoy, my grandparents hosted a celebration for me. Both my sister and my parents went. She was given permission to leave the ward for a short while, and her eyes were filled with pure resentment, which I could see. She sat there exactly like she had before, lip curled and gave me a glare as if she wanted me to burn. Since she hadn't been permitted junk food for so long, she had already shed a good amount of weight. Additionally, she intends to stick to her food plan for a while. My birthday party's junk food was actually the first she had eaten in a long time. She was still unable to tolerate not being the focus of attention, though. She didn't scream when I extinguished my candles this time. Rather, she started sobbing uncontrollably. This was just more of her manipulation, and I can tell you that now. She simply sobbed and asked, "Why?" Again and again. She's only 9, I know. However, keep in mind that she was 8 years old last year and demanded a car of her own because I received one as a present when I was 18. She must be 15 years old before she can even obtain a learner's permit. On my 19th birthday, my sister threw a fit since she didn't get any pizza, presents, prizes, or anything else. She then began to curse at our parents and made an attempt to leave the restaurant. In a twisted manner, she was essentially attempting to replicate what I had done the previous year. You may say that I'm giving that too much thought. However, I am familiar with my sister. She will also take action if she believes it would help her achieve her goals. My sister was taken home early after my parents apologized to everyone. My grandfather went over to talk to them first, though. Later, my grandmother provided me with some information. He advised them to either give my sister what she wants or refrain from taking her to a party somewhere else, because if they don't stop permanently, this will never end. After hearing everything, my sister realized her tantrums weren't working, so she was dragged out kicking and screaming. The following morning, she was driven back to the war, and she's now there. I don't know how long she'll be there. Despite being only a child, she is the most obstinate person I have ever encountered. Until she hits her lowest point, she probably won't change. Until then, she will be trapped in a situation that does not accommodate her expectations. Nobody has tried to hold me responsible for my sister's behavior over the past year. Not even my parents. They had to acknowledge that I was completely to blame for this, and they brought up my sister to be a narcissist. Additionally, from what I've seen and heard, supporting a narcissist is also a type of addiction. With the exception of narcissism, my sister has not been diagnosed with any mental diseases. According to what I've heard, she is actually smarter than I am. According to Tess, she had an IQ of about 110. She simply dislikes exerting herself unless there is a benefit of some sort. This is how she was brought up. It will probably take years for her to recover. For my part, I'm doing great by myself though. I acknowledge that I had to learn how to manage my finances and take care of all of my own needs. Being a grown-up is difficult. However, compared to my life with my parents and sister, it's still 1,000 times better. Edit. It has been pointed out that it is absurd for my sister to be in a long-term facility for narcissism alone. I concur that it wouldn't typically. I have not been informed if there is a more profound diagnosis. I can sense that they withhold certain information from me. Furthermore, since I am not my sister's mom, I am unable to just ask the doctor. However, my sister also uses self-destruction to try to acquire what she wants. In reality, her promise to cut herself with a knife in order to escape boarding school was only one of several similar episodes that transpired. She has been forced to acknowledge that she is not a princess ever since she entered the ward. She still has the mindset to go to any lengths to achieve her goals, though. She threatened to kill herself if my parents didn't take her out for fast food when I turned 19, and then attempted self-harm after hitting her head against a wall, which is her most frequent approach. My mom was reluctant to inform the ward about this. However, my dad did. My sister is capable of self-harm and has done so in the last month alone as a kind of emotional blackmail. However, from what I understand, she has made fewer attempts. She also seems to be lying when she claims that she was harmed by her own doctors. Her tales, however, never add up. I suppose pathological lying could be a contributing component in addition to narcissism. And the reason she's in a long-term ward, and is probably due to everything I just mentioned. My parents would gradually give in to her demands once more if she was at home. After then, things would simply return to a reasonably normal state, which Bella is probably relying on. Update 3. I learned more about Bella. To begin, I'm a fool. Some of you pointed out errors in my post, questioned my assertion that my sister is smarter than me, and other things. In school, I received a D and a C. My worst subject was math. It was brought up that I had consistently given my sister's age incorrectly. I'm to blame for that. Usually, all I say to them is that she's 10 years my junior. Additionally, the numbers frequently blended together when discussing her. This time, I suppose I'm doing the arithmetic right on paper because my sister was born in June when I was 8 years old, and she got to blow out my candles for the first time when she was 3. I'm terrible at math. Additionally, it doesn't help that I try to make some details ambiguous or somewhat incorrect in order to remain anonymous. In hindsight, though, this isn't really anonymous because anyone could read it and recognize me. I made a huge mistake, and everything revolved around my sister from the time of her birth. This goes beyond simple, envious, older brother nonsense. Even though she didn't get to blow out my candles until she was 3 years old, my sister was celebrated in front of everyone on my birthdays before that, and I became bitter as hell. Imagine the birthday boy sitting there while his mother uses the occasion to celebrate by showing off a baby in front of everyone. Until it was cake time, my folks essentially ignored me. At the time, it wasn't such an awful memory because my grandparents made up the difference. They even informed me that it was somewhat reasonable because my mother had a very difficult pregnancy and my sister had just been born a month earlier. However, that's how things transpired on my 9th birthday, and nobody brought it up or took any action. Before anything significant happened for me, my parents essentially performed the same thing on my 10th birthday, showing off all of my sister's infant achievements. My sister was the only one who loved several of my gifts, which were obviously toddler toys. They were referred to as supplementary gifts, I recall. They weren't for me, despite the fact that my name was on them. Once more, nobody in the family voiced their opinion or took any action. Then things really started to go south on my 11th birthday. My sister's name was on some of the presents. Additionally, my parents demanded that Bella be permitted to extinguish my candles. They all witnessed, but none of them took any action. And after that, my sister was always the focus of the birthday celebrations. She was occasionally even permitted to assist me in opening my gifts. It didn't help. All they wanted was for me to appease her. You'll see why I eventually lost it on everyone back then when you magnify all of that by the fact that I was 18. For this reason, I claim that my birthday was stolen for 8 years. In actuality, though, it was more like 10 years. After that, I truly didn't think my parents' own admission of culpability was sufficient. I pretend to be able to forgive them. However, I doubt that I ever will. Another person informed me that a narcissist diagnosis is not possible till the age of 18. I accepted my father's word for it because I'm not very knowledgeable about this kind of thing. I therefore discussed it with my father over the phone this morning. I simply replied with Google when he first asked how I knew. He sighed and acknowledged that, among other things, my sister was exhibiting symptoms of potential future NPD. However, a formal diagnosis is not yet possible. However, there is also a good chance that my mother has a mental illness, which they refuse to identify. Months ago, my mother was diagnosed with both PTSD and the aforementioned disorder, which my parents eventually acknowledged. My mother won't talk about the PTSD that was brought on by certain childhood events. I'm not asking her to either, because it's fairly horrible, whatever it is. My father became irate and told me that my sister is their problem, not mine, when I questioned him about why I was given such white lies and simplified details. He simply assumed that if he told me that, I would overlook it. He went on to say that they should be the ones to be concerned about my sister. I just need to put Bella out of my mind and concentrate on my future. Unfortunately, it's among the most sensible things he's ever said to me. Regarding Bella, it is unclear how long she will remain in that ward. Someone else alerted me to the fact that I had another question for my father. And if my sister has ever mentioned wanting to murder me while I'm there, it was a somewhat compromised response. I was the one my sister blamed. She places more blame on our parents, though. Her idea that what was mine should be hers, and what is hers was the root of our argument. She's even envious that I now live in my own place. Other angry outbursts and demands for the same things I have resulted from that. Over time, therapy has gradually calmed her anger. She was permitted to attend my 19th birthday because of this. Her actions that day, however, intensified once more. When a toddler sees something, have you ever seen it say mine? My sister, however, has a mental illness related to my birthday, and my parents are solely to blame. Due to the fact that it has been that way for as long as she can remember, my sister still feels entitled to my birthday. She yelled last year for that reason. She freaked out this year because of it. My birthday has always been hers in her mind. I've been asked to leave the situation alone by my parents, and that my sister's medical care will require a significant amount of time. Furthermore, there is no assurance that she will ever recover. My mother is currently receiving therapy and taking medication for her own condition. Additionally, the drug frequently makes her drowsy. Despite being temporarily placed in a ward after striking my father with a bottle, she managed to keep her work. Her supervisor has a great deal of empathy and gave my mom permission to work from home when she returned. Even so, it led to some sort of demotion and decreased salary. I want to clarify one more thing that I didn't cover in my previous post. This year, my birthday fell on a day other than my birth date. Rather, we commemorated the day of my belated celebration from the previous year, which I don't mind because I will always remember my birthday as a bad day. In essence, I was born at the end of July. A week later in August, the delayed birthday celebration took place, and I wanted to commemorate that day going forward. Finally, people frequently inquire about my well-being. I was getting along just okay, if not very well. Admittedly, growing up has not been easy, taking care of my finances, paying my bills, and so forth. However, I was all right. What's the phrase for the stress I've experienced since returning to Reddit to discuss this? Relapsing mentally, I suppose? I don't know. I believed I was fine. Now, though, I'm constantly pessimistic and edgy. As a result, I was even sent home early by my supervisor. They know all about my past. I still feel awful, though. My heart was racing just from drinking coffee this morning. I'm going to have to look for free counseling or anything at local support organizations. After all, I'm on a tight budget. But right now, all I'm trying to do is unwind and forget about life. If I ever come back here, I might end up feeling stressed out like this again. I might not, therefore. I'm grateful to everyone who read my posts and sympathized with my suffering. You're decent folks, However, I must pull myself together and move on from my past. Edit. After reading my post again, I believe I made a mistake in my calculations. When my sister was born, I was a lot of years older than her. I didn't bother proofreading it much because I typed the entire dang thing too quickly. My supervisor ordered me to take today off because I've been such a hot mess. In fact, this morning I puked. I've had a pounding headache all day and it's just stress. I spent much of my time lying in bed and frequently getting in and out of the shower. I'm just now beginning to feel better. I wouldn't have told the world if I had realized it would make me feel this way. Furthermore, I came upon another post from just 6 weeks ago last night when someone had parents as awful as mine without anyone even informing me about it. Additionally, they sliced the cake that their older child had purchased on their own, just because they wanted a piece when their own Bella sobbed. The parents chose to chop up their cake the night before because their golden child, who I believe was about my sister's age, wailed and begged for the cake. The older child, after all, had bought for their own personalized cake and celebration. In the end, the celebration was completely canceled by the op. I don't blame her either. However, after seeing that and reading articles like mine, I've come to the conclusion that there are far too many parents just like me. Parents that can only be changed by disgrace. However, in their core, they remain the same individuals. I'm going to visit my grandparents to discuss the situation, and I'm going VLC with my parents. I'm not sure if I'll want to leave another post here or even respond to any comments. To be honest, I hate to check my inbox. I need to take a vacation from Reddit, and I might not return.